This is the Hype Squad with Charli McConnell, a podcast where women can be full of themselves and brag about what they're good at. Each week, we're going to bring you conversations covering topics like motherhood, life, relationships, business, and everything in between, because anything is possible with your very own Hype Squad. What's up, ladies? Welcome back to the Hype Squad. I'm so happy you're here. And today I'm going to do a solo episode, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about my experience with coaching as a client. Before I dive in, full disclosure, my sister Nikki got me this lip plumping stuff. And I had it in a drawer full of lip glosses. I put it on, not even realizing what it was, and literally feel like my lips, like 1,000 fire ants have bit my lips. So you're welcome. The plump lips are for you. Anyway, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about my experience with coaching, how I got into coaching, all of those things. And I kind of have to back up a little bit to tell you how I met him. So his name is Hal Runkle, and I will put his contact information in the link below or in the show notes. But when I first met Hal, he was coaching some friends of ours. He was doing some relationship and family coaching for them. And they had such an incredible experience with him. And so my husband Colby and I were really interested. I had been wanting to do relationship therapy, couples therapy, solo therapy. I love therapy, right? And so we went out on a limb and met with Hal. And to be perfectly honest, my husband was not on board with working with a therapist or a coach or anything like that. And it's not for everybody and everyone's not ready at the same time. And I respected that, but we did meet with him and I loved his energy. I'd already heard so many good things about him. So we met with him together. And after the fact, Colby was like, nope, we don't need this. And I said, okay, well, we tried, And to be perfectly honest, we didn't have any sort of like big red flags that were happening at the time. Um, Nothing big, which in my opinion was the best time to start working with somebody, right? Like nothing's broken, but we were just trying to enhance our communication or whatever. Anyway, I understood his point of view, which was there's nothing wrong. Let's don't dive into this. We put it on the back burner. Well, fast forward several years later, I can't even say how many at this point. But several things had happened. Sailor had been diagnosed with epilepsy. I had started my own business, and both of those things, along with other just life things, were really affecting us as individuals, as a couple, as parents, all of the things, right? And I, on paper, was struggling the most with epilepsy, with Sailor, and with my wrapping my head around it and coming to terms with it and all of these things. And I remember towards the end of that particular year, which right now thinking back on it, I'm trying to think what year it was. I guess it was probably 2020, like the Christmas of 2020. I decided that I wanted to work with Hal. All of the stress from work, all of the stress from epilepsy and doctor's appointments were really taking a toll on me. And I wasn't showing up in my relationship or as a parent or anything in a way that I was proud of, right? So I decided I was going to work with Hal by myself. So that January, I signed up for a 12-week intensive with Hal. That was 2021. And my sole focus was to work on my acceptance of epilepsy in our life and what everything was going to look like and how to handle it and so on and so forth. The ironic thing looking back on my experience with Hal as a coach was I went into it with that being my goal and we never even talked about it. And I say that to say, I work with a lot of women and they come in to our container of coaching with goals. And I ask them to set goals, right? To set intentions because I do feel like it's really important. But what I always say to them is your goal is probably a lot deeper than that. It's probably something else, but this is the thing that's getting your attention. This is the thing that is pushing you over the edge to reach out to someone to start working on things. But what typically happens in my experience as a client and a coach is it's something much deeper than that. And I really learned that from the client perspective with working with Hal is that there were so many other things happening. Um, some of the biggest things I took away from my experience with him and just with coaching in general was okay, well, let me just start here. So the first thing was my biggest takeaway from the entire thing is that I can't make anyone else happy. I had spent so many years of my life, I'm not even going to say my relationship, but my entire life being a people pleaser, right? And I say this as a side note. We're all people pleasers to some degree, right? And I say to a lot of women that I work with, the goal is not to do away with that completely. The goal is not to be a people pleaser at all, right? That's not that's not the goal, right? Because in my opinion, you have to have a healthy level of people pleasing attributes to function in society, right? To have manners and to um speak kindly. People pleasing is not inherently a bad thing, right? But for me, it was everywhere. And I'm sure most of you, if not all of you listening, can totally relate to that. I was living for everyone else in my life, not for me. So much so that if anyone asked me what I wanted in any capacity, whether it was, where do I want to go on vacation? What do I want for dinner? What do I want to do? I don't know. I don't know. What do you want to do? Right? Like, I promise that someone listening, all of you listening, probably have felt that same way. But I realized with working with Hal that I was I was doing this behavior and acting this way because I thought that by doing that I could make the other person happy. So by saying I don't have an opinion, what's yours, it would make them happy. That's a really simplified way of putting it. And the way that it really showed up for me was in my marriage. So I thought that the way I acted or the things that I said or the things that I did would make my husband happy, right? As simple as like the outfits that I would wear, um, the ways that I would show up in our intimate relationship, things like that. I thought I was doing it for him. This is what he wants, so I'm going to show up this way. And what ended up happening is I was just so inauthentic of who I was that I just lost who I was. But I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was doing all of this to make him happy. And what Hal did for me is he really just like threw it back at me and like, and I can't obviously articulate it exactly the way he did, but he basically said, why do you think you have that much power over him? Why do you think that you are capable of making another person happy? You know, and he would give examples and challenge me on that. And he was right. And what I realized is that by thinking I was making him happy, by sacrificing myself, we were both losing. My husband and I both, right? And, obviously there were a lot of, specifics where that came up. But I took that into every other part of my life. The fact that I can't make other people happy and I will suffer every second of every day if that's how I choose to live my life. And it changed everything for me. It really did in my relationship and just in my life in general. And there were so many ways that that showed up. The first way is I quit drinking. And there was a lot of other things to that, but I had really been wanting to quit drinking. And by quit drinking, I mean, I hardly ever drink, right? And if I do, it has to be really intentional and have to really want to do it. And even then, I maybe have like one or two drinks. So I'm not an alcoholic. I don't have a problem with alcohol. I just didn't enjoy it anymore. And I was finding myself doing it because I thought that's what my husband wanted me to do. Like that would make the experience better for us, whether it was a dinner or whatever. And I was always regretting it. And so, how by giving me this mantra of you can't make other people happy, I started to pull back from that. And I decided, okay, well, let me just see if I can show up as a better partner, not drinking. And I slowly but surely started to do that. And it was such a huge impact for me. First of all, to think I can still be fun and have and be exciting and, you know, be a good time not drinking. I don't have to do that. And then I can wake up the next morning and feel good and not be hungover or get great sleep because that was the number one thing. Like it affected my sleep so negatively and it just wasn't worth it for me. But I also, the way I was dressing, and this is one I really want to share because I feel like that this could land for somebody. I, first of all, I've been married since I was 22 and I've been with Colby since I was 20. So 16 years at this point, my entire adult life. And we would go on dates or we would go on trips or I would buy clothes that I thought he would like. And I'll give you an example like a cute little mini dress with a super uncomfortable strapless bra and, 5-inch stilettos. If you know me at all, I hate heels. I can't really even walk in them. I always end up taking them off. Um, uh, really uncomfortable, right? Not my style, but what I thought he wanted to see, right? And maybe he had said some things in passing like, I really like that dress or I really like those shoes. And I internalized as that's the only thing he wants me to see me in, right? And I started to get really resentful is probably too strong of a word, but I have to dress up for this dinner. I have to wear these heels and this dress and I'm going to be super uncomfortable. And then I would go into the night and be super uncomfortable and be pissed off that I wore it when I should have just wore, something that was more me, right? Like it's like I knew internally this wasn't me, but I was still doing it. And part of this lesson of not making other people happy was okay, I am not going to dress like this anymore. And I had this big conversation with Colby where I basically was super defensive looking back on it. And I said, I'm not going to dress like this anymore. I am only wearing stuff that makes me feel confident and sexy. And I'm not wearing heels anymore. I'm going to wear sneakers or Jordans or whatever. And you're just going to have to be okay with it. And I remember exactly where we were and the exact look on his face. And he just was like a deer in headlights. And he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "I'm not doing this for you anymore, blah, 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 blah," like had this whole dramatic outburst. And he said, "I never told you to dress like that. I never told you to wear those things. Like, yes, I said that they looked good, but that was my intention was never to say, like, don't dress, only wear this, right?" And it was a great example of how this people pleaser trying to make other people happy had internalized so much to where the entire narrative was in my head. And I'm sure it probably applies to like a thousand other things in my life. But for me and my relationship, it was the most present, prominent thing. And so I got rid of all my heels. I started only wearing Jordans. I started wearing sneakers with my cocktail dresses. And thank God for these college girls in Auburn where I live because they made that totally acceptable. All they wear are tennis shoes, white tennis shoes, and their dresses and stuff. And so it became like the style, right? So it was perfect timing. But now I dress for me and I still have these moments of like looking in the mirror and putting heels on and thinking, oh, no, no, wait, that's not me anymore. I'm not doing that. But that was just one example of making myself happy first, because ultimately I can't make anyone else happy. And then that will exude from me to everyone around me. right? It'll make me a happier, um, a more enjoyable person to be around, all of those things, right? And I got to really understand who I am authentically. And I got that from coaching, right? Like I got that from someone being in my corner, listening to me, challenging me, which has been a huge part of coaching, as the coach and as the client. Is it's a lot about challenging each other. You know, why do you think you did that? Why, could you have done it this way? However it comes up in certain situations, but also playing a lot of devil's advocate. Like, okay, so, yes, I am your coach, but I'm not going to blindly be on your side here. I'm going to give you the perspective from what I think the other person might be thinking, things of that nature, right? Like it's a very balanced perspective. And what I always say about coaching is that therapy and coaching are very similar. And I have a lot of clients who work with therapists at the same time that they work with me. And I think that that's a great way to do it because a therapist is going to, in theory, and hopefully going to dig into your past, the 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 reason why you are the way you are, why your patterns are what they are. And what I hear from a lot of people with therapy in particular is they get to this like stagnant point in therapy where they feel like nothing else is happening. They've already told their whole backstory. They're not really getting a lot of accountability or tips or tricks or anything like that. And it just feels like I'm just coming in here and like rehashing my week or my last 2 weeks, whatever. And to me, that's the perfect moment for coaching to come in because coaching is so much future oriented, uh, goal based, right? Like you come into it with intentions, but also I'm holding you accountable. We are putting homework assignments in place, or we are putting techniques in place that the next week when I see you, I'm going to ask you about it, right? We also have a ton of contact in between so that if something comes up in real time, you have access to me. You can reach out to me at any point. And I feel like it's like the ultimate hype girl. And that's one of the reasons why I named this the Hype Squad, is because I do feel like I am your hype girl in your corner and reminding you of what you're capable of. And I'm just so grateful for my own experience with coaching. And there were so many other things that came up in coaching that I could, dive deeper into. And one thing that I will add is, we talked about Sailor in our last session, and maybe last two sessions. And I remember we were traveling at the time, and I'll share this because this is a good tool that I share with some of my clients too. But we were going out of the country and I was really concerned about her medication. She takes multiple medications twice a day. Right now, currently, today, we're on 3 medications twice a day. And one of them's a liquid. And it always makes me very nervous to travel because it could spill. It could spill, right? Or like, God forbid, the thing comes undone in the Ziploc and it spills all in the bag. Like it feels like it's more risky, right? Like something could happen to it. And, the first couple of trips we went on with her after her diagnosis, it was like panic, traveling with medication, and it's gotten better, but I still have a tinge of that now. But I remember telling him I had these nightmares leading up to it about her medication spilling, um, or like the heat got to it and something went wrong, or, something along those lines. And I was carrying so much anxiety about it. And so one of the practices that he gave me, a tool that he gave me to use, was very, very simple, but it was basically like creating a little bit of a flow chart in my head. And the question to ask between each point in the flow chart is, then what? Right? So, okay, her medication spills. Then what? Okay, I'm going to call her doctor. Then what? Okay, her doctor is probably going to put in a new prescription, and either I can get it filled here or I can get it filled at home and they can ship it to me. Okay, and then what? Okay, then if it doesn't come in time, what could happen? then what? And so it's basically like this flow chart of following it all the way into like the end. And it basically helps you navigate what could happen and how you're going to react. So basically, it's like a planning mode of this is the route I'm going to take. It's almost like in case of an emergency, this is the direction you're going to go type of thing. And it really helped me wrap my head around it wouldn't be the end of the world. There would be a way around it. I would have a backup plan before I go so that it makes me feel better so I don't spiral on the what if. I have a plan. I can put in a contingency plan. Okay, I'm going to have a backup amount of medicine at home, or I'm going to have a backup medicine that has not been opened in my carry-on or my checked bag. Like, just it helped me process. And I give this to a lot of clients because so many of us have this tendency to go in a spiral about things because we just like our thought process almost like short circuits, and we just go into like this panic mode of, oh my God, what's going to happen? What am I going to do? And if you're anything like me, I get really, I mean, anxious, obviously, but I get into like this tizzy of I can't think any further past this point. Like it's gray, right? I'm kind of like the person that when I panic, I just kind of run around and I don't actually do anything. Like I'm that type of person, right? So if you resonate with that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so this was really helpful for me, the then what type of flow chart to process all of the worst case scenarios so that, you know, the night that I had the nightmare before we left, I could have gone back in that moment and created this flow chart and come up with these contingency plans so that I wasn't continuing to carry all of this anxiety inside of me. So, and I mean, I'm sure if I sat here for long enough, I could think of, you know, 100 other things that he taught me and gave me tools for. And I'm so grateful because he was also the one that pushed me to become a coach. And I think that in the grand scheme of things, it is such an absolute game changer to have someone believe in you, to push you, to challenge you, to encourage you, to be your cheerleader, to be your hype person, whoever that may be. And it literally transformed my life. And the funny part, full circle, is when I was done with my 12-week intensive with Hal, I think I actually did a little bit more than 12 weeks. My husband signed up with Hal to do his own intensive and still works with him to this day. And it's been a year and a half, 2 years at this point. Some of us are so afraid to get out of our own way, I think. At least I think that was my husband's experience, is that you just think you can do it all. You think I have enough support. I can't ask for more. I don't need more. And what we fail to realize sometimes is that even if you don't have this like blowing up type of moment, there's always work to be done. There's always another level to unlock that is where a coach can be really, really helpful. And I wanted to share this story because I feel like, first of all, the great thing about the podcast is that I couldn't share all of this on Instagram stories or anything like that. And I wanted to share my experience. I also wanted to pay my respects and my gratitude to Hal for being this person for me, this catalyst, and not just for me, for my husband, and for anyone else that he works with and touches, but also for inspiring me to do this work as well. He is still a mentor of mine. I still go to him for questions about the podcast and for, you know, coaching tools and things of that nature. And I am just so inspired and excited to share this gift with anyone and everyone that I come, you know, and encounter. Um, so yeah, it feels good to share this story. I don't think I've ever said it quite like this out loud. And I thought it was really important to share some of my big takeaways and what that experience was like. So, I say all this to say if any part of you is interested in coaching or what it could look like for you, reach out to me. I have a free discovery call. We can get on a Zoom call because you do not need to be in the same place as me. Most of my clients are virtual, but get on a Zoom call with me and let's talk about it. Get to know me, get to know what I do, um, and then go from there. Because I think that once you open up to the idea, like the sky is the limit. So I am so grateful that you're here and that you listen to this podcast and that you're following me. I'm just so grateful to have you in this space. And I wanted to share my hype list because everyone that comes on, we talk about the hype list. And the hype list basically is a list of achievements that you've accomplished and things that you've overcome in order to accomplish those things. So the first one the accomplishment I want to share is, and I'm doing this like in real time. I want to say the biggest accomplishment for me is becoming self aware. And I think that that's such a multi layered thing. But I think I walked around my entire life, 34 years, being very unself aware, like not knowing who I was or what I wanted and just kind of feeding off people around me. And it wasn't until I started working with a coach that I was able to learn myself better. I'm not going to say I didn't know myself at all, but better and who I wanted to be. And it started this entire momentum of going down this path. So definitely becoming self aware. And the obstacle that I had to overcome in order to get to that place is getting out of my own way, actually putting in the time, actually asking for help, actually sitting in stillness and silence and self-reflecting and not running away from conflict. If something blew up in my relationship or in a friendship or a confrontation of some kind, I am typically the person who runs from that. And I didn't run from it anymore. I sat in it and I reflected and I discovered why I was triggered, why I was angry. So definitely an obstacle that I overcame. So it felt really good to share that. So thank you for giving me the space to do that. And thanks for listening. I am so happy you're here. And I can't wait to see you guys again. Thanks for coming and getting hyped with me. And I hope you're all kind to yourselves today and every day.